The first time Lindsay called me a loser, it was on a Thursday, around 3:15 in the afternoon. I remember the clock ticking behind her because I couldn't look her in the eyes. I had stopped by to bring her a jar of my homemade strawberry preserves. It was something I did every year when the berries came in early and sweet. "Why do you keep showing up here?" she said, not even unwrapping the towel I'd wrapped the jar in. "God, Mom, don't you have anything better to do? You don't do anything. No one needs you here. I'm not 12 anymore." I stood at the threshold of her foyer, clutching the towel in my hands. My jaw trembled before my voice could catch up. "I just thought you'd like it," I said quietly. "You used to." She looked past me, down the drive. "Maybe that's the problem. You still think we're in some little farm kitchen in Vermont, and you're baking your way back into being important." She scoffed. "You're just a loser who never did anything. Dad practically carried you through life. You didn't even work." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She meant it. And when she said it, I swear I saw something behind her eyes. Not just frustration, not even anger. It was cold. Dismissal. I turned without a word and walked back to my car. That was in June. Now it's October. And today, Lindsay called me again. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, "I need you to come, today, right away, please." Her voice was quiet, almost unrecognizable. I hadn't heard it that small since she was 7 and broke her wrist falling off a swing set in the yard behind the old house. I drove the 2 hours in silence. It's been 9 months since we really spoke. I didn't ask for details over the phone. Something in her voice told me this wasn't a moment to negotiate. Lindsay lives in a big colonial house in a neighborhood where everyone mows their lawns on Tuesdays and Christmas lights go up exactly after Thanksgiving. It's a home that always seemed more like a showroom than a sanctuary. Her husband, Dean, makes enough money that Lindsay hasn't worked in years. They have no children, at least not the kind you see in photo frames. When I pulled up, her car was in the driveway, but the house looked empty. Curtains drawn, porch light off. I knocked. No answer. I remembered she used to keep a spare key in a plastic rock near the back gate. It was still there. I let myself in. The silence inside was sharp. Then I heard it. The faintest movement upstairs. I followed it to the master bedroom. That's where I found her, sitting on the floor, knees to her chest, blanket wrapped tightly around her. The room was dim, and it took me a second to notice the mark under her left eye. Faint purple, just enough to bloom down to her cheekbone. She didn't look at me. "He thinks I cheated on him," she whispered. "But I didn't. I never did. I thought about it once, just once, and he knew." I sat down beside her. She smelled like laundry detergent and old perfume. The kind I gave her at Christmas in 2018. She hadn't thrown it out. "Dean's watching me," she said. "He has cameras in the house. He checks the odometer on my car. He records the calls I make. I can't even breathe right without it setting him off." I didn't speak, not yet. "I tried to leave once," she said. "But he said he'd ruin me, legally, financially. He told me he'd tell the neighbors I was unstable, that I drank, that I lost control. He'd find a way to make me the threat." Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were rimmed red. "You were right," she said. "About him, about me, about everything, but I'm scared now. I don't know what to do." And then very softly, "Please, Mom, please don't walk away this time." I stayed with her for a long time on that floor, the room hushed except for the ticking of the bedroom clock. She held the blanket tighter around herself, as if the layers of wool might shield her from Dean's shadow. I hadn't seen her this small since she was a child, curled up in the laundry basket during thunderstorms. "I can't tell you everything yet," she whispered, her eyes darting to the corners of the room. "He listens sometimes. I don't know where all the mics are." Mics, not just cameras. "Lindsay," I asked softly, "has he hurt you before?" She didn't answer immediately. Her jaw clenched and she looked down at the bruise. "This was the first time he hit me hard enough to leave something." She reached up and traced it absently. "He used to just grab my wrist, push past me, slam doors, say things. But that night, it was different." "What happened that night?" She swallowed hard. "He came home early. I was in the den on a video call with someone from an old book club, a man. Nothing happened, but Dean saw it. I swear I didn't even flirt." Her voice cracked. "But he lost it, said I'd embarrassed him, that I was disgusting." "Who was the man?" I asked gently. She hesitated. Colin Hart. He was married to a woman in the group. She died 2 years ago. We messaged now and then. It wasn't anything." I filed the name away, careful not to press. She wasn't ready. He smashed my phone, Lindsay continued. Took it apart right in front of me. I haven't had access to my emails in days. He changed the Wi-Fi password, then left for a business trip. And the letter? She nodded. I handwrote it, dropped it in a public box the morning he left. I figured if you came, maybe I could find a way out. Her eyes begged me for something I wasn't sure I had. Strength, maybe, or courage. I thought about Arthur. He'd have known what to do. He'd have wrapped her in his arms and found a lawyer by morning. I was never him, but I could be something else. Present. We have to leave, I said finally. Tonight. Quietly. She flinched. No. If he finds out, he'll make good on his threats. He's not bluffing, Mom. He already moved money from our shared account. I have no access to anything. Do you have cash? Jewelry? She shook her head. Friends? None that Dean doesn't already know. He'd notice if I called anyone. I realized then how methodical this had been. Not just abuse, isolation, calculated erasure. Dean hadn't merely wanted Lindsay silent. He wanted her invisible. I stood and walked to the bedroom dresser, pulled open a drawer. Neatly folded sweaters. Under those, a small silver watch and a bracelet I recognized from years ago. I pocketed them. I checked behind picture frames, inside shoeboxes. Quietly, methodically. Found a few 20s in an old purse. Not enough, but it was a start. Then I looked at the ceiling and froze. A black dot in the corner above the door. Round, no bigger than a dime. Lindsay, I whispered. Don't look up, there's a camera in the room. Her face went white. He could be watching now, I mouthed, then forced a gentle smile for the camera. We're just having a little talk, aren't we? I said aloud, like a mother visiting for tea. Lindsay blinked, understood. She reached for my hand and squeezed it. We stayed another hour in that room, speaking carefully. When it got dark, I asked to help with dinner. She led me to the kitchen, like we'd done it 100 times before. The camera in the corner above the stove watched us both. He'd built a prison for her, room by room, but I wasn't going to let her stay in it. The next morning began like any other. I made toast. Lindsay made coffee. The performance continued. She handed me a grocery list in the kitchen, innocuous enough, but her handwriting, jagged with urgency, curled into the margins. Check for devices, under light fixtures, inside vents. Don't act suspicious. I nodded as though I was debating brands of granola. Then I handed the list back with my own note beneath an item. Do you know where the router is? She pretended to reread the list. Pantry cabinet, top shelf, she said casually. Dean wasn't watching in real time, not actively at least. The evidence was in the routines, the lack of immediate reaction to our whispered strategy, the absence of calls or messages. If he had been monitoring live, he'd have known already. I waited until Lindsay took a shower to move. In the pantry, I climbed onto a stool and found the black router in the back behind canned soup and expired cereal boxes. 2 extra wires extended from it, one into the wall and one feeding a small black device taped to the side. It wasn't standard. I took a quick photo of it with my phone and sent it to an old friend of Arthur's, Ray Milton, a retired telecom technician now living in Tampa. He owed me a favor from long ago. That's a remote server port, probably routing footage or logs to an off-site server. If it's got cellular backup, cutting power won't stop it. You'd need to physically destroy or disable it. I slipped the router back in place and returned to the living room. That evening, while Lindsay folded laundry, I searched the rest of the house carefully. In the hallway light fixture, I found a tiny black lens. Another behind the decorative vent in the bathroom. One more hidden in the smoke detector above the entryway. 5 total: bedroom, kitchen, hall, living room, bathroom. Each carefully placed to monitor routine, not intimacy. This wasn't about sex or jealousy. It was about dominion. Lindsay wasn't a wife to Dean. She was a subject, a possession. That night, after pretending to sleep, I quietly opened Lindsay's closet and dug into a box marked warranties and paperwork. Dean's name was on every account. He was the primary holder on the mortgage, the bank accounts, even the utility bills. Lindsay's name was present, but always secondary. A dependent. One folder held legal paperwork from 2019. I skimmed quickly. Power of attorney, signed during a health scare Dean had. Lindsay had been named in appearance only. Any authority he gave her was revocable. In another folder, a prenuptial agreement. I expected it. What I didn't expect was a second document dated later, some kind of revocation of marital rights if Lindsay were found to have committed infidelity. It gave Dean authority to freeze joint accounts immediately. My heart sank. It wasn't just manipulation, it was legal groundwork. Mom, her whisper came from the doorway. You're not sleeping? I stood and faced her. We're going to need help, outside help. Her face paled. Who? Colin, if he's still around, anyone who knows something. She shook her head. Dean already made sure people think I'm unstable. He told friends I've been paranoid lately, forgetting things, drinking. If I call anyone, they'll just assume I'm having one of my episodes. You're not having an episode, I said firmly. You're waking up. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. We need a plan, I said, and we only get one chance. The next step was Colin. We didn't dare use Lindsay's phone or computer. Dean could be tracking every keystroke, every call. So I told her to write a letter, old-fashioned and quiet. We'd mail it from another town, no return address. Just her handwriting and a gentle ask. If you still remember me, please help. I'm in trouble. I need to talk in person. Don't respond. Don't write back. Just wait. If I can come to you, I will. She wrote slowly, hesitating often. The letter was short but thick with meaning. I slipped it into my purse. We'd send it when we found a safe moment. That afternoon, we went for a walk. I suggested it casually over breakfast, and she played along like it was her idea. I knew there'd be a camera in the front hallway, maybe even one on the porch, but not in the park down the road. We didn't talk much during the walk, too exposed, but I kept my eyes open. Dean's car was gone. I knew he wasn't due home for another day, but even his absence felt like a threat. Back at the house, Lindsay dug through the attic while I made noise downstairs with vacuuming and the laundry. Anything to cover the sound of boxes opening. She came back with a dusty cookie tin. Inside, $223 in 20s and 5s. A passport, her expired driver's license, and something I hadn't expected. A birth certificate for someone named Caroline Dean Walker. I looked at her. That was going to be her name, Lindsay said quietly. Before I lost her, she would have been 6 this year. My breath caught. I hadn't known. Lindsay had never told me she was pregnant. Never said a word. It explained the sorrow she'd carried the last few years. The distance, the dullness behind her smiles. I reached out and she let me hold her hand. Later, while she rested, I went into the garage. Dean's car was a sleek silver sedan, spotless. Lindsay's, a modest green compact, was parked beside it. I popped the hood, pretending to check fluids. That's when I saw it, wired neatly to the battery, small enough to be missed. A GPS tracker. He knew everywhere she went. Even walking could be a risk if she parked elsewhere. I didn't touch it. Not yet. I snapped a photo and messaged Ray again. Looks like a tracker. Any way to disable without tipping him off? Ray responded in minutes. Remove the battery first, then take the tracker off. It'll look like a glitch or natural disconnect. Just don't let it transmit a hard stop while active. I relayed the message to Lindsay. We'll need to disconnect it just before we leave, I said. We only get one window before he realizes something's wrong. That night, I tested our story with the neighbors. Pretending to deliver muffins, I knocked on the door of the woman 2 houses down. Middle-aged, well-groomed, looked like she taught Pilates. She gave me a tight smile. Oh, Lindsay's mom, she said. I thought you were in Vermont. I was, I replied warmly. Just visiting for the week. Lindsay said Dean had to travel again, too quiet in the house. The woman tilted her head. Well, just glad you're here. She's been off lately. I'm sure you've noticed. There it was. The narrative planted like poison ivy. I smiled. We all get tired. Marriage is a lot sometimes, isn't it? The woman softened, nodded. She mentioned things were rough. I just hope she's okay. So they didn't hate her. They just thought she was unwell. That I could work with. We needed a burner phone. I didn't have one. Lindsay didn't dare buy one in town. But I remembered an old trick from when Arthur and I took cross-country trips. How we used to pay cash for prepaid phones when we wanted to avoid roaming charges. That detail became our next step. The next morning, I suggested a mother-daughter spa day, loud enough for the kitchen camera to catch it. We smiled, acted lighthearted. Lindsay even joked about needing her eyebrows done. It was our best scene yet. We drove out of town using my car, not hers. I took a detour through a gas station near Dover and told Lindsay to stay in the car. Inside, I purchased a prepaid flip phone with cash, then ducked into the restroom to charge it using a power bank I'd brought from home. Back in the car, I handed it to her. Only power it on if absolutely necessary. Keep it off the rest of the time. She nodded. On our way back, we mailed the letter to Colin. A red box outside a grocery store 30 miles from home. No cameras nearby. It was the first breath of relief I'd felt in days. That night, Lindsay finally opened up. "I didn't lose her by accident," she whispered. I turned to her. Her face was pale in the blue light from the hallway. "He told me we weren't ready, that we couldn't afford a baby, that I'd ruin my body, and then he'd stop being attracted to me. I was 8 weeks along when I made the appointment. He took me there, waited in the parking lot." My stomach twisted. "You never wanted to?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "I thought if I didn't, he'd leave, or worse, I didn't want to be alone." She wasn't crying, not then. It was worse than crying. Numbness, like something inside her had already been buried with the child. "I named her anyway," Lindsay said. "I needed to, so she wouldn't feel erased." "Caroline," I whispered. She nodded. It wasn't just a child Dean had taken. He'd taken the version of Lindsay that believed she had choices. I spent the next day prepping a donation bag. That's what I called it aloud. I packed it with Lindsay's passport, a few clothes, the cash, snacks, sanitary supplies, a portable charger, and the burner phone wrapped in tinfoil. I hid the bag inside a large fabric bin in the laundry room marked seasonal decor. If Dean returned early, he'd never look there. We were nearly ready, but time was tightening. That evening, Lindsay received a text on the home landline. Dean's number flashed on the caller ID. "Back tomorrow instead of Thursday. Miss you. Hope your mom's visit ends soon." He was coming early. Lindsay showed me the message, her hands trembling. "That's a warning," she said. "He knows something." "No," I said slowly. "He suspects. That's different." Still, we had to act fast. We didn't have time to wait for Colin to respond, or for the next perfect moment. We had one night left, and a dozen choices to make by dawn. We didn't sleep that night. Lindsay sat in bed, knees to her chest, while I paced the hallway with my cardigan wrapped tight. The house was too still, like it knew what we were about to do. At 3:10 a.m., we moved. I started with the garage. The overhead bulb flickered as I gently opened the hood of Lindsay's car. Her hands shook as she held the flashlight. I disconnected the battery, then the GPS tracker, a small rectangular device now cold and silent. I tucked it into a shoebox and placed it in the back of the garage freezer, under a bag of frozen peas. Ray had said a sudden disconnection would be suspicious, but if Dean thought it was a fluke, a dead battery, or weak signal, he might not act immediately. I wiped my hands and nodded. That's it. Back inside, we prepared the misdirection. Lindsay scattered her art supplies across the dining table. Watercolors, brushes, half-finished pages of abstract shapes. I wrote a note on her stationery and taped it to the fridge, taking a few days to clear my head. "Don't call. Don't look. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Beside it, we left an open bottle of wine and an empty glass, just enough to hint she might have been spiraling. We knew Dean would fill in the rest. He wanted to see her as unstable. This would confirm it. By 4:20 a.m., her donation bag was zipped inside a pillowcase. Lindsay changed into jeans and a dark hoodie, hair pulled into a braid. She didn't look like the woman I'd found curled on her bedroom floor days ago. She looked like someone holding her breath before a long swim. We slipped out the back. We didn't use Lindsay's car. It would draw too much attention if seen outside town. Instead, I had arranged for a car rental in my name, paid in cash, waiting in the lot behind a 24-hour pharmacy 10 miles away. I'd told them I was an author researching small-town life. The clerk hadn't asked questions. By 5:05, we were on the highway, heading north. I kept checking the rearview mirror. Every car felt like a tail, every headlight like Dean's rage barreling toward us. Lindsay stared out the window, silent. Just past Concord, I asked, "Where do you want to go?" She paused. "Maine, the coast, anywhere with salt in the air." We stopped at a rest area at sunrise. She powered on the burner phone. No messages, no missed calls, just a quiet hum. "I think he still believes I'm home," she whispered. I nodded. "Let's keep it that way." At a diner outside Camden, we used coins for a payphone. Lindsay dialed a number from memory, Colin's landline. She let it ring twice, then hung up. A signal, one they'd agreed on long ago, back when she still believed she had friendships she could trust. We waited. At 3:17 p.m., the burner phone buzzed. A message appeared on screen. Parking lot. 6 p.m. No questions. Just get in. She didn't smile. She just closed her eyes and whispered, "He's still there." Colin pulled into the parking lot just after 6 p.m., driving an old Navy Ford with a slight scrape on the bumper. He parked 3 rows away, left the engine running for a moment, then shut it off and got out slowly. He looked older, gray at the temples, slimmer than I remembered from the few photos I'd seen years ago. He didn't approach right away, just stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets, studying Lindsay like she might vanish if he blinked. She stepped out of the car. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. He nodded once. She walked toward him, and the silence between them said everything. I stayed behind in the car, watching them from a distance, letting her choose. After a minute, Colin motioned toward the Ford. She looked back at me. I gave her a small nod. 15 minutes later, we were sitting at Colin's small cottage near the inlet. It was modest, but private, the kind of place where the wind made more noise than the neighbors. He made tea and offered soup. Lindsay barely touched hers. Colin spoke gently. "He's looking for you. I heard from an old mutual friend who works at the town clerk's office. Dean called in asking about a forwarding address. Something about needing to get in touch about financial paperwork." Lindsay flinched. "But," Colin added, "he hasn't called the police. Not yet. Which tells me he doesn't want them digging around too much either." We all sat with that thought. Margaret took out a notebook she'd been carrying since the drive started. She opened it to a page titled Next Steps. "I have pictures," I said, "of the GPS tracker, of the cameras in the house, of the wiring in the router. I also have notes about what Lindsay told me, including the prenuptial clause and the banking setup." Colin leaned forward. "It might be enough to start a report, but you need someone who knows how to package this for a court or for protection orders." "Someone discreet," I said. "Lindsay's not ready to go public." Colin nodded. "I know someone. She used to work in family law, retired now, but sharp. I'll call her tomorrow morning." Later that night, Lindsay sat out on the small porch swing wrapped in a blanket. I joined her. "He's going to punish me," she said. "Not if we stay ahead of him," I replied. She looked down. "I feel like I abandoned everything." "You didn't abandon anything," I said. "You escaped." She turned to me then, voice small. "Do you believe in redemption?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out at the dark water, the way it shimmered like glass under the moonlight. "I believe in starting again," I said. "And I believe you've earned that." She reached for my hand. I held it. Inside, my phone buzzed. A message from Ray. "Got a contact at a domestic violence network. Anonymous intake possible. You want it?" Yes, we did. Colin's contact turned out to be sharper than I expected. Her name was Nora Elliott, early 70s, small-boned and direct, with a voice that could cut through fog. She arrived 2 mornings later, dressed in hiking boots and a wool sweater, carrying a worn leather briefcase and a manila envelope. She listened without interruption as Lindsay explained haltingly everything, from the cameras to the financial control to the staged disappearance. When it was over, Nora sat back and asked one question. "Do you want to fight or vanish?" Lindsay blinked. "What do you mean?" "You've already escaped. That's something most women in your position don't manage. But now you have 2 paths. Fight him in court, prove he's dangerous, tear down the legal web he built around you, or disappear and start again under the radar." "I have no money," Lindsay said quietly. "He controlled everything." Nora nodded. "We'll work on that, but this is about more than money. It's about your name. Do you want to reclaim it or bury it?" Lindsay glanced at me. "I don't know yet." That answer would have to do. Nora reviewed the photos, then examined the documents I'd brought. "This prenuptial clause, it's cleverly written, but exploitable. Emotional coercion invalidates consent in some jurisdictions. The surveillance, if proven, could support a restraining order. But we'd need corroborating voices, neighbors, witnesses, preferably someone who can testify to his behavior." "We've been careful," I said. "There's no direct proof yet, only what we've documented ourselves." "I've seen cases won with less," she said, "but it takes stamina. If we go forward, he'll retaliate legally, and maybe worse." Colin offered to call in a favor, a woman he knew who worked at a transitional shelter on the edge of Portland. Lindsay could register under a pseudonym for short-term protection while we worked through next steps. That afternoon, while Nora drew up a safety affidavit, I stepped outside to take a call from Ray's domestic violence contact. Her name was Elise, calm, steady, the kind of woman who could lead someone out of a burning building with just her voice. She offered an intake, completely confidential. "We've seen men like this before," Elise said. "Charismatic, successful, respectable in public. But they build prisons behind closed doors." I looked through the window at Lindsay. who sat with a mug of tea in both hands like it was anchoring her. She's not ready to file anything, I told Elise, but she needs someone who understands. She already has someone, Elise said. You, and now us too. That night, Lindsay finally cried, the kind of cry that leaves your bones hollow, and I held her like I should have the day she called me a loser, when I should have seen that pain came long before the words. It took 3 days for Lindsay to decide. On the 4th morning, she came into the kitchen, hair damp from a shower, wearing jeans and a plain sweater. She looked like herself again, or at least a version of herself I hadn't seen in years. She set down a mug and said, "I want to fight." My heart swelled and broke at the same time. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "He spent years trying to erase me. I need to prove I'm still here." Nora arrived that afternoon with a thick binder and a portable scanner. We set up at the dining table. The air buzzed with tension and quiet determination. "There's a strategy we can take," Nora said, flipping open a file. "We document emotional coercion, electronic surveillance, financial control, all forms of domestic abuse under state law. We build a civil case first, then open a restraining order petition. If it escalates, we consider criminal charges." "I want a restraining order," Lindsay said. Colin offered to act as courier for legal documents, passing them through a friend in Boston who'd redirect them to the court anonymously. Elise arranged for Lindsay to have a phone consultation with a trauma counselor, someone trained to help survivors manage high-risk separations. Meanwhile, I returned to Newburyport. We agreed someone had to play the role of normalcy, check the mail, field calls, make appearances. I would be the decoy. Dean's call came 2 days later. I let it go to voicemail, then played it back on speakerphone in the kitchen, hand braced on the counter. "Margaret, it's Dean. I know you were visiting Lindsay. Look, I'm concerned. She's been gone almost a week. No contact, no calls. She's not answering anyone. I'm just trying to understand what's going on. If you know anything, I think it's time we talked." The voice was calm, but the pressure behind it was unmistakable. He didn't sound like a man worried about his wife. He sounded like a man who'd lost control of his property. That night, I left a voicemail. "Dean, I haven't heard from her either. She left the house before I did. Maybe she needed time." The next morning, I noticed the car across the street, different license plate, New York tags, sat there for hours. Then again the next day. He was looking, quietly. But we weren't hiding anymore. At the cottage, Lindsay worked with Nora to file for an emergency protective order. Colin drove the paperwork across state lines. Elise checked in with me by phone and confirmed she'd secured Lindsay a temporary shelter with no digital footprint. But Lindsay declined for now. "Not until I know if I'm safe here," she said, "and not until I face him." Dean would know, eventually. The restraining order would arrive at his front door with his name in bold letters, but this time, it would be her voice behind it, and mine standing right beside her. Dean received the restraining order on a Thursday morning. We knew because Nora's friend at the courthouse sent word the moment it was signed for. No response came for hours, just silence, an awful, tight-lipped silence. Then at 4:12 p.m., my phone rang. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. "Margaret, this is ridiculous. I don't know what Lindsay's told you or what kind of fantasy she's cooked up, but I won't stand for it. I've been patient. I've tried to be decent. I'm giving her a chance to fix this quietly before it gets ugly." I saved the message, then forwarded it to Nora. We waited again. On Sunday, Dean filed a countermotion, a thick packet of manufactured accusations, emotional instability, substance abuse, financial misconduct, all aimed at discrediting Lindsay. He'd included screenshots of manipulated text logs, a photo of a bottle of wine on the counter, the one we'd left as a decoy, and vague claims from unnamed friends who said Lindsay had episodes. But we were ready. Nora filed a formal rebuttal. She attached our surveillance evidence, a sworn statement from Elise, and the testimony of a neighbor who, despite Dean's gossip, came forward. It turns out the Pilates instructor across the street had once seen Dean grab Lindsay's arm in the driveway and shout something that made her lock her door in fear. "I didn't want to get involved," she wrote in her affidavit, "but I couldn't live with myself if something worse happened." Lindsay read that affidavit 3 times, holding it like a lifeline. The court granted a temporary injunction while the investigation proceeded. It wasn't over, but it was a start. Lindsay decided to speak at the hearing, not just through lawyers, but directly. She stood in a small courthouse room in Portland, her voice trembling only once. She read from notes, pausing often, describing years of quiet control, lost choices, and the deep, aching silence she'd lived in. Dean didn't show. His attorney read a statement, clinical, dismissive. But when the judge asked why Dean had not yet filed a formal complaint with police about Lindsay's disappearance, the lawyer hesitated. That hesitation said enough. The court granted a 6-month restraining order, reviewable for extension. With it came access to emergency aid funds, housing support, and a temporary freeze on Dean's ability to alter joint financial holdings. Lindsay cried in the parking lot, not because she was afraid, but because she had won something, not everything, but enough to stand up. 2 months later, she rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Bath, using her own name. She's learning to cook again, teaching watercolor at a community center. She has a lock on her door that she turns herself. She keeps the burner phone in a drawer, powered off, just in case. I visit every other weekend. Sometimes we say a lot. Sometimes we just walk by the sea in silence. The last time I saw her, she hugged me and whispered, "You didn't walk away this time." And I held her and said, "No, sweetheart, you called me a loser, but I'd rather be a loser beside you than someone who wins alone."
Edify dad.